So here in this video, again, I want to actually video this conversation because it's kind of an important one to have in terms of the system of training. Because we're talking about, you see a Hildegard here, about tools. And so Hildegard is attached to the flat collar versus the choke chain. Here I have Brody on the choke chain for this exercise. But here, one of the conversations we're having, Christian, is about the difference between, again, with using this tool like the flat collar. Kind of explain to me what you noticed using the flat collar when you're doing the method in terms of kind of the difference between using that tool and, say, the choke chain.
Yeah, for starters, for me personally, it helps kind of maintain that baseline. Therefore, when you need to increase that baseline, it's a smoother kind of transition to a higher level. I also feel like when the dog, Hildegard and I have been working for months, so we're at a level that I want to match her intensity. So the choke chain is very specific. You know, it really can target and really make it clear to the dog what you want. But once that relationship's starting to get more firmed up, you would say once that contract is rewritten, then I feel like the flat collar allows me to kind of really communicate in a more measured, kind of reasonable way to the dog, and it's still achieving the same thing because it's communication and it's clear. Lines up, you know. But when she's real worked up, sometimes in the morning when she really wants to go out, you know, we'll use the choke chain for the first 3 to 5 minutes, and then the next half hour, 20 minutes, as we're interacting and walking or whatever, it's most of the time flat collar.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's one of the things that we talked about, because you watch my videos, a lot of times you will see me using the choke chain quite a bit with dogs and stuff. But this is what I talk about in terms of, you know, the difference with tools when you start to dial into the relationship and the dog's state of mind and, you know, intentional control. But when you're first starting the system as a trainer, especially when you're learning, I really encourage using the flat collar as much as possible, which Christian is doing, because what that does is it dials you into a dog's state of mind, because with the flat collar, it forces you to have to move certain ways. It's going to give you more insight into what control and influence are doing to affect, you know, the perceptions of a dog. And so once you really get that foundation over time, and this can take like a long time, then when you hook a dog up on the choke chain, you're using it differently. This is why people kind of do go crazy, okay, when they see me, you know, using a choke chain, because their perceptions of that tool through, say, balance training or through certain things is kind of off, because that's that cranking and yanking.
Right.
And so even, for example, when I'm using a tool, and again, I encourage people to kind of consider this, when I'm using a tool, for example, right now, I have the choke chain right now on Brody, but it looks super tight, so when people look at this, they say, oh, Brody's choking right away. Like there's like it's like that kind of imagery of how certain tools are used in the, you know, dog training world, through, again, not being dialed in the way I described. And so when I put a dog in the choke chain, you know, there's just very little, there's just enough, you know, control brought through it that it's holding it up high on his neck. But trust me, it's not like a lot. But then it's just the baseline's there, so I just have to move just a bit or put a little bit more to affect the dog. But how I use a tool is different now over the years, because, you know, when using, he's at, Christian's at the level now with being kind of a new trainer, where he's using the flat collar a lot, that is bringing him to that same place in his journey, or will over time, where he's like, okay, this is different now, so when I use the choke chain, that's different too. Would that be kind of how?
Yeah, absolutely. So right, and that's what I mean. It's matching kind of our relationships at a level that, you know, the choke chain's not really, I don't want to say warranted, but it's not. We can communicate in a different way with this tool, which is a little bit more measured. And it's easier to handle in some ways, because the choke chain has to stay up right under the chin, so it's not coming across the neck.
The neck.
Right, so it requires a little more practice and skill, especially when you want to, you know, influence before you need to correct. So yeah, I think it's just it's another. It's kind of, you work into where you're really using the flat collar more and kind of understanding how to communicate
Oh, it is, and I tell people all the time, like when people talk about choking and all these different things.
Yeah, no.
I understand it's hard for people to reconcile the reactions to dogs in a relationship, but at the physical level, when you're using a certain tool, there's pressure applied around the, whole area, okay, up here. And so the dog's more sensitive to that. When the choke chain's up nice and high in the neck, it's working more off just like, the more sensitive areas around the sides. That's about the trachea and choking dogs. Understand that there's a technique here when I'm using certain tools that's not about choking dogs that way. But here's the problem. Sometimes you'll get a reaction from the dog because there's stress on the dog, the mind of the dog's being affected, and it'll mimic the choking, right? When really it's about mind and body, and so it's hard for people to reconcile certain reactions anyway, because they just right away will go to that choking type of, reaction. Right. And oftentimes that's not the case at all. Okay, because the issue here is about relationship. Okay, so
right.
But here the important point is, and in fact, I've just put the flat collar back on Brody because we're about to do the push-pull exercise for socialization, which you'll see on my videos, and so I will switch back over to the flat collar because when I'm doing the push-pull, it keeps that influence more leveled out. Okay, it's not meant
right.
to be so intense that way.
Right.
And so oftentimes when I'm training dogs, you'll see that in case same here with Hildegard is I have both collars on the dog at the same time. So I can switch back and forth between the flat collar for some things, but then the choke chain, if I'm say out on the street and say I'm first training dogs and it's going to be more, a lot more challenging, I need more leverage, okay? I need more control.
Right.
And so it just makes sense to use the choke chain. But again, make sure it's up nice and high in the dog's neck, okay? Yep. And the pressure that's applied isn't meant to be a lot at times, okay? But it just gives me the safety so the dog can't, say, slip out of it and be running down the street and bad things happen. I mean, the worst thing could happen if I have a flat collar on, I'm like, just say, hey, I'm just anti this device, so I want to use a flat collar. What can happen is the dog goes into a level of challenge. Next thing you know, the dog gets out of that collar and gets hit by a car.
Yeah.
Okay, so or something really bad happens to the dog. Yeah. That's the worst thing that could ever happen. I never want that to happen.
Yeah.
So I want the goal is to be secure in what you're doing so that those things aren't going to happen in the first place. So.
And I would recommend a buckled flat collar. Mm-hmm. Hildegard has a buckle like a belt.
Yeah.
Versus the clip.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because again, you're just to Dale's point, you're just giving yourself as the handler another level of kind of comfort, in that it's unlikely, if not impossible, the dog can slip out of the collar.
Oh, absolutely. And the whole point of all this is that, tools are a means to an end. Okay, so when you get to a level, because really in this whole system, the relationship is going to get better and better and better.
Right. So
certain tools fade away. The crate can fade away. The issue about even using a choke chain can start to fade away. And getting down to just a straight normal flat collar, walking the dog or whatever, because the whole principle here is tools are an extension of the person.
Yeah.
Tools are an extension of the relationship. Influence and control come through the tools, but those tools are temporary. So, but however, when I'm training dogs, you'll see I'm dealing with dogs that are hit the aggressive level or gained a lot of control. So certain protocols need to be in place at that point of the relationship, but they're not there forever. That's the thing I understand. Everything transitions over, but as a trainer, like I said, for Christian, yeah, he's using that flat collar a lot. Even cases where I would say, well, maybe you should switch over to the choke chain, but if he can work through that with the flat collar, that's going to give him a lot better insight into what